Hi, I'm Bonnie, and I'm recording this from Alderlore, the home of Alderlore Soul. When Sugata Mitra first coined the term soul, he meant it as self-organized learning environment. At Alderlore, we like to think of it as self-organizing learning experience, because that's what we're offering. We're offering young adults an opportunity to come together, work collectively, work on an individual project, take advantage of this beautiful environment that we're located in the western part of Connecticut, and learn how to self-organize their own learning experiences to make them rich and profound and purposeful. Now, ever since we launched our website last month, I've been having a lot of inquiries from all over the world, people really wanting to know a little bit more about me, about what my vision is and what my educational philosophy is. So this video is an attempt to connect on that level and kind of give you a sense of how Alderlore Soul came into being and what we would really hope we can make of it. In 2006, I went to a conference where the keynote speaker was Stephen Scott Glenn. And he's a very dynamic speaker, and he told a story about Einstein and Einstein's predictions and visions for the future, pretty much in the time period we're living now. And Einstein said that in the future, machines would take care of a lot of the knowledge-based work that we do now, or we had done in the past. Just like machines take care of a lot of repetitive physical work for us, Einstein saw that knowledge itself would become, in the future, like data was for him then. There was organizing, storing, and retrieving data was the work of computers. And today, what we're seeing with smarter and smarter computers and the development of artificial intelligence and the semantic web and crowdsourcing and having computers learn from collective engagement with people, what we're seeing is that machines are being able to be very competent in organizing, storing, and retrieving knowledge. So in the past, machines exclusively worked with data, and it required people to use the data to make it into knowledge systems. But today we're finding, as Einstein predicted, that machines are getting increasingly better than us at organized, storing, and retrieving knowledge. So this has huge implications. It has huge implications for students entering college at this time in terms of what are going to be the careers available to them. So the implication that means for me today is that our responsibilities as adults and educators is to support the development of skills in young adults that machines can't do. That our responsibility is to cultivate new capacities, perhaps in many instances, in human development that are beyond the range of technology at this moment. And then everything moves along. So that was one of the first really important signposts for me back in 2006. In 2006, in that same keynote speech, Stephen Glenn said that Einstein was very fascinated with the rate of knowledge throughout recent history. In that in the past, for example, my parents' parents, knowledge doubled so slowly that the only responsibility parents and teachers had was to reproduce the knowledge that they had been given and make sure that that was adequately passed on to their children. Fast forward to when I was in college, it seemed to me that knowledge was doubling so rapidly that by the time you got into college, you were faced with research agendas into the unknown. And recently I heard a man speak about the kind of pickle that children are in terms of the fact that by the time they receive all the knowledge in a certain discipline, then that knowledge is already obsolete. And so that they're faced with skills that they haven't learned. So if you're graduating from college and you have all this knowledge, and even in many other sciences you have to go on to postdoc and doctoral, so you might spend 30 years in an institution where you're just receiving knowledge. But then by the time you've accumulated all that knowledge, then the research has really advanced way forward. And so it's really hard for children at that stage, or adults at that stage, to make the transition to where they're doing research, where they're asking questions of the unknown. So that was a second signpost in that keynote speech that really got me to thinking. And then the third thing that Stephen Glenn said in the keynote speech was that, again, the rate of knowledge is developing so fast that now knowledge doubles faster than a generation. I read something the other day that knowledge doubles in less than a year. So if we really take that to heart, what that is saying is that by the time children are born and into our responsibility, then we don't know what to teach them. We are way behind the curveball here. And so knowledge is doubling so fast that we are in this situation where we are not only teaching our children skills to face an unknown future, but an unknowable future. And that had a really big impact on me. So we have these three aspects. Number one, that machines are going to be able to organize, store, and retrieve knowledge better than humans, so that humans have to develop capacities way ahead of the technological curve. Number two, that research requires so much received knowledge that by the time you actually internalize all those knowledge, you, number one, are way behind the curve, and number two, don't have the skills for doing action inquiry into the unknown, for innovation and invention. And number three, that educators and teachers and parents are in the situation of having to design an educational system and having to support their children in the capacity of creating capabilities for them to face not only an unknown future, but an unknowable future. And I think we really, really, really need to take that to heart, that we need to stop thinking that our children need received knowledge. Not only do they not need it, but that can be handled by machines, but that it is doing them a disservice. And the third point is that we need to take on the responsibility of identifying what are the capabilities that our children need to face an unknown and unknowable future. To talk to them like that, to say, we don't know what your future is going to be like. What we can do is support your own growth in the capacities that you will need to face an unknown future. Recently I've been thinking about how special and innovative and creative young adults are. And I've been going around the country doing workshops on insight practice. And inevitably, when there are intergenerational people in my workshop, it is very clear that young adults, I would say 35 and younger, have a completely different mindset, a completely different understanding of change in the world, how change happens, the kinds of process methodologies that are important to them. And I'm not sure that this is schooled in them. I think that this is an evolutionary leap, and I'll tell you why. My research has shown me that one of the most significant changes or significant situations we are dealing with today in terms of this educational and intergenerational aspect of our situation is that children are now born into a world that's so technologically advanced that this makes a huge difference in how they come to think about reality. So, for example, I grew up in a school system before there were personal computers. I've seen the development of personal computers over time. I've learned from the beginning, both in business and in school. And I've seen how the web has changed over the last 10 years. So for me, this has the internet is a kind of a relative or a contingent aspect of reality. I remember what it was like before. But for children who are now thrown into the world, a digital world, the world of digital technology and the internet and collective intelligence, this is not a contingent aspect of their world. This is the real world. And so that creates a situation where the world feedbacks to them in a much different way than it did to us. And this creates actual evolutionary leap in the cognitive architecture of our children. So this is another situation that I think as educators we have to take to heart, and we have to design education now for children that in a certain sense, in the context that they're born, are actually smarter than us. That they have insights into this world that we do not have, simply by the fact of this thrownness, this thrown into a world that is different than the world we experienced as children. So I like to tell children that they are penguins, and it's a little story I wanted to share with you. There's this great documentary called March of the Penguins. You probably have seen it, and most people remember the part of the story where the penguins take the long march deep into the Antarctic, and they pair up, and the female lays an egg, and then the egg gets passed to the male, and the females make the long march to the sea to feed. And then in the early spring, the females make the long march back. The chicks are born. They find their mate, they exchange their chick, and the males make the long march to the sea because they're starving. So most people remember this story for the profound challenges of parenthood and the responsibilities. So, but for me, the most surprising and the thing that stuck with me the most was at the point then that the mothers are now feeding their chicks just from the storage of food that they had been eating when they were in the sea. And the chicks are growing, and the mothers are starting to starve to death. So then at a certain point, they make the long march to the sea back to feed. And the interesting thing is the chicks wait. They're all the same generation, they're all cousins, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And what they don't know is no one's coming back for them. So this is extraordinary, because in the movie you see the chicks are getting hungry and restless, and they all kind of like congregate and move around nervously. And then all of a sudden there's this kind of like self-organizing scene happening, and the natural born leaders start to get together in little groups, and it's like a congress, and they kind of like talk to each other, and it really looks like they're making decisions, and the whole colony kind of self-organizes as if they're the central meaning of this generation. And then that at some point some inner knowing kicks in, and then that little congress starts to lead, and they make the march to the sea. And at each point where there's challenges, there may be fissures or water holes or some dangers, then that little congress gets together, like trying kind of collectively making a decision, and they move forward until they get to the sea. And this is a generation that has never made the march. It's all from an inner knowing, led by natural-born leaders. They get to the sea, they've never seen the sea before, and in the last scenes of the movie, the same kind of initiation happens where the Congress starts to look into the water and they get to like cackling to each other, and then finally someone dives, and then the next one, and then the next one, and that becomes a generation that lives together. So I like to think of the generations that are born today as penguins. Because of this rapid advance of both technology and knowledge building, in a sense, they are born left alone. They are born to self-organize. They are in a situation where they have to find each other, find their natural-born leaders, self-organize, and move into an unknown future from some kind of deep inner knowing that we as educators, teachers, and parents need to learn how to cultivate for them and how to support the cultivation of that. So that is what, for me, over the last 12 years or so, has been a progressive research, inquiry, and understanding into what do we need to be as educators, adults, and parents to really support children into transforming their own future. And I think this is an essential responsibility that we have at this time in history.